The encounter. The wind howled through the trees, but Ryan didn't notice. He was too focused on the strange, unnatural glow ahead. It had started as a flicker on the horizon, like a distant star, but now it was blinding, bright enough to make the night feel like midday. He adjusted his rifle, his military training kicking in, and moved cautiously toward the light. It wasn't supposed to be this way. Earth was at peace. The alien war, if it could even be called that, was over. But something in the back of Ryan's mind told him this was different. This wasn't a normal night patrol. As he neared the clearing, the light became clearer, revealing a small metallic object that hovered just above the ground. It was a sleek, silver craft, no larger than a car, shaped in a way that didn't quite make sense. It had no wings, no engines, just a glowing blue pulse beneath it, flickering erratically. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. Then he saw her. The girl was kneeling beside the craft, her body hunched, trembling as if she were terrified of something he couldn't see. Her hair was long, white, almost silver, and her clothes were a strange combination of flowing fabric and metallic accents. But it wasn't just her appearance that caught Ryan off guard. It was the way she looked at him. Her eyes were wide with fear, bright and otherworldly, like mirrors reflecting an unknown universe. And yet, there was a strange sense of recognition in them, as if she knew something Ryan didn't. Ryan froze, his heart pounding. Every instinct in him told him to approach, to help, to do something. But fear, the kind that was new to him, held him in place. The girl's gaze never left him. She flinched when he took a step forward, her hands rising in front of her, as if to ward him off. But she didn't run. She couldn't. There was nowhere to run. The forest stretched on for miles, and her craft, whatever it was too damaged to leave. Ryan's voice was a whisper at first, more a murmur than anything. "Are you okay?" She didn't respond, but her body language spoke volumes. She was terrified. Every muscle in her body tensed as though she expected an attack. Her breath was rapid, shallow. Ryan could see the tiny, rapid movements of her chest as she tried to steady herself. She didn't trust him. And why would she? He stepped forward again, slower this time, trying to show her he meant no harm. He kept his hands visible, trying to make himself as non-threatening as possible. But with every inch he moved closer, she recoiled, as though he were the greatest danger she had ever encountered. Then, without warning, the air around them crackled. A faint hum filled the silence, like the sound of static electricity. Ryan's eyes darted to the sky, his senses on high alert. The atmosphere felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Something was coming, something powerful, and the girl felt it too. Her eyes widened even more, and for the first time, she looked away from Ryan. She stared into the sky, panic flooding her face. Ryan's training kicked in. "We need to move. Now." His voice was more forceful this time, trying to break through her fear. The girl didn't seem to hear him. She stood, unsteadily, as if her body was unused to movement. Her hands were outstretched, her face showing clear signs of desperation. She was saying something, but the words were in a language Ryan couldn't understand. Sharp, rapid, and foreign. There was no time to try to decipher it. A low hum, almost like a growl, came from the sky. It was getting closer. Ryan didn't know what to do. Should he protect her? Should he run? The air felt heavier by the second, and a sense of impending danger settled deep into his gut. Before he could make a decision, the craft flickered once more, the blue light dying down in a heartbeat. The girl's expression shifted. Suddenly, she wasn't looking at him at all. She was looking past him, toward something, or someone. A shadow moved in the distance, dark figures emerging from the forest edge. Ryan's pulse raced. Whatever it wasn't friendly. He instinctively grabbed the girl's arm, pulling her towards him. She resisted at first, a brief struggle, but then she seemed to realize he wasn't an enemy. The shadows were closer now, moving fast. Ryan knew they had no time. He couldn't let these figures catch them. With one last look over his shoulder, he began to drag the girl with him into the forest, toward cover. But in the back of his mind, one thought lingered. Who were they? And why was she so terrified of him? The unknown was closing in, and Ryan's world was about to change forever. The first contact. The dense forest around them seemed to close in as Ryan pulled the girl through the underbrush. Her feet barely touched the ground, her pace unsteady, yet she kept up, her breath coming in short gasps. Ryan's heart pounded, and his instincts screamed to keep moving, to keep her close, but his mind was racing just as fast. What were those figures? Why had she looked at him with such fear? They reached a small clearing just as the sound of footsteps, too many footsteps, grew louder. Ryan quickly shoved the girl behind a large tree and crouched beside her. His fingers tightened around the grip of his rifle, ready for whatever came next. The girl didn't speak. She hadn't said a word since their brief encounter by the craft. And now, even as the danger approached, she remained silent. Her eyes darted, scanning the woods, her body tense, ready to flee if needed. She wasn't just afraid of the figures. They were more than just soldiers. There was something else, something about Ryan that caused her to panic. "Hey," Ryan whispered urgently, "are you okay?" She didn't respond. Instead, she shook her head, her eyes wide with terror. She seemed unable to calm herself. Ryan noticed the subtle glow that flickered around her fingertips, like tiny sparks of light, pulsing in rhythm with her frantic heartbeat. It was almost like she was connected to something, maybe even to the very air around them. Ryan leaned in closer, trying to make himself heard over the sound of footsteps growing nearer. "You need to trust me," he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet urgency. "I'm here to help you." Her eyes flicked to him, and for the first time, Ryan saw something different, a flicker of recognition, something deep within those alien eyes. She wasn't just afraid of him. She was afraid for him. But why? Before he could ask, she placed a hand on his chest. Her fingers were cold, but there was an odd, almost electrical energy that hummed beneath her touch. She didn't speak, but Ryan felt it. A message or a warning, maybe. Something he couldn't quite grasp. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the shadows, its silhouette dark against the faint moonlight. Ryan's breath caught in his throat as he instinctively raised his rifle, but the girl's hand shot up, stopping him. "Wait," she murmured, her voice a soft whisper that seemed to echo in the stillness of the forest. Ryan didn't understand why she was stopping him. What was she trying to tell him? The figure stepped forward, revealing itself to be humanoid but not quite human. It was tall, far taller than any man, its limbs long and thin, with skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Its eyes glowed faintly, a piercing blue light that made Ryan's skin crawl. This wasn't like anything he had seen before. It wasn't a soldier, not from Earth. Ryan's grip tightened on his rifle, but the girl's hand stayed firm on his chest, pushing him down slightly. She looked up at him, the fear still present, but there was something else now, something darker in her gaze. The figure spoke, though Ryan couldn't understand the language. The words were guttural, strange, and haunting, like nothing he had ever heard. The sound of its voice was almost a growl, deep and foreboding. Whatever it was saying, it wasn't good. Ryan didn't need to understand it to feel the threat. The figure's stance was aggressive, its posture one of dominance. The girl flinched, her body visibly trembling under Ryan's hand. She took a step back, a quiet whisper escaping her lips. Ryan couldn't make out the words, but he understood one thing. She was terrified of this being. More than she was afraid of the soldiers or even of him. The figure's eyes locked onto hers, its expression cold, unblinking. A strange, tense silence filled the air, and then, as if deciding something, the figure slowly turned its gaze toward Ryan. "Get out of here," Ryan muttered under his breath, his instincts urging him to protect the girl. He wasn't about to let anyone, or anything, hurt her, but he was no fool. He knew he couldn't fight this thing alone. not without backup, and not in this terrain. But to his surprise, the alien figure didn't attack. Instead, it straightened up, looking past him to the surrounding woods. Its body began to glow with an eerie, almost otherworldly light, and the air around them hummed with a strange energy. The girl gasped, stepping closer to Ryan, as if she were trying to shield him from something invisible. "What is it?" Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. The girl shook her head again, her eyes wide in panic. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Whatever was happening was beyond her control. But Ryan didn't need her to explain. He could feel it too. The air had shifted. They were no longer just hiding from the alien threat. They were caught in something much bigger, something that involved both him and the girl in ways he couldn't yet understand. The figure turned and began to move away, disappearing into the darkness, its glowing eyes fading with every step. But Ryan didn't feel any safer. If anything, the silence that followed felt even more dangerous. The girl's hand trembled as she reached for his, her grip weak but insistent. She was pulling him in the opposite direction now, away from the clearing. She knew something he didn't, and she was urging him to follow. Ryan hesitated for a moment. What was going on? Why was she so afraid of everything, including him? And what was that creature? There were more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. The night had only just begun. The escape, Ryan's heart hammered in his chest as the girl pulled him deeper into the forest, her grip tightening around his wrist with an urgency that left him no time to think. Every step they took felt like they were running from a nightmare that had no clear shape or form, only an overwhelming sense of danger that clung to them like a shadow. The quiet hum of the forest had returned, but it wasn't comforting. It felt like the calm before a storm. Ryan could hear his breath, heavy and uneven, matching the girl's, but there was no time for him to catch it. No time for questions. The only thing that mattered was running. He had no idea where they were going, but the girl clearly knew. She moved with purpose, darting through the trees, her silver hair flying behind her like a ghost in the dark. Ryan struggled to keep up, his legs heavy with the weight of his rifle, his thoughts spinning in a whirlpool of confusion and fear. "Where are we going?" Ryan managed to breathe out as he tried to keep pace. The girl didn't answer, but he didn't expect her to. Every moment was a blur of movement and fear, with no words exchanged. As they reached the edge of the forest, Ryan could hear the unmistakable sound of something crashing through the trees behind them. The noise was growing louder, closer. Something, or someone, was on their trail. Ryan's pulse raced. He didn't know who, or what, was chasing them, but the sound was unmistakable. They were coming for them. A few seconds later, a beam of red light flashed through the trees, cutting across the night like a blade. The girl jerked back, her body instinctively pulling Ryan out of the light's path. He hadn't seen where it came from, but he could feel its heat, its purpose. He didn't need to look to know that whoever was tracking them had no intention of letting them escape. Ryan gripped the girl's arm, pulling her into the safety of a narrow crevice between two large rocks. They crouched low, trying to stay hidden, trying to catch their breath. The girl's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but even then, there was a flicker of determination in them. "They're close," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing hum in the air. It wasn't just the sound of footsteps anymore. It was something bigger, something mechanical. The girl looked at him, her eyes wide, her lips trembling. But then, she turned her head toward the sky, as if she could sense something he couldn't. She was listening to something, something beyond his understanding. Ryan squinted up at the stars, trying to spot anything out of place. But everything seemed still, too still. Then there was a shift, a ripple in the atmosphere, like a wave of energy passing through the air. He felt it deep in his bones, a pressure like gravity had changed, pulling at them both. "That's them," the girl whispered, her voice low and full of dread. Ryan didn't know what she meant, but before he could ask, he heard it. The unmistakable sound of engines, heavy and roaring, like an ancient beast rising from its slumber. A pair of glowing red lights appeared in the distance, cutting through the trees. The figures were approaching, moving with unnatural speed. And this time, there was no mistaking it. These were the enemies. The girl's grip on Ryan's wrist tightened, pulling him in the opposite direction. There was no hesitation now, no moment of doubt. They had to move. Fast. "Follow me," she said, her voice sharp, commanding. Without another word, she darted forward, pulling him along. Ryan's feet moved faster than he thought possible, adrenaline surging through him as he tried to keep up with her. The glow of the red lights was growing closer, and so was the deafening sound of the engines. Ryan's mind raced. Who were these people? What were they after? And why was she so important to them? As they pushed forward, Ryan's instincts screamed at him to look back, to see what was behind them, but he forced himself to focus on the girl in front of him. She was their only hope. The forest seemed endless, the trees stretching out in all directions, but somehow the girl knew exactly where to go. She moved like she'd been here before, like she was part of the forest itself. Ryan tried to keep up, but his body was growing tired, his breath ragged. Suddenly, the girl stopped. She turned to him, her eyes wide with urgency. "We can't outrun them," she said, her voice hoarse. "We need to hide." Ryan barely had time to react as she pushed him behind a large boulder, urging him to stay low. She moved swiftly, almost silently, her movements a blur as she prepared something Ryan couldn't see. The hum of the engines grew louder. They were almost upon them. Ryan's heart pounded, his mind racing for a plan. He wasn't about to die here. Not like this. Not when he didn't even know what they were running from. The girl's hand shot up, and suddenly, there was a sound, a quiet electric buzz, and the boulder in front of them began to glow. The air around them shimmered, distorting like heat waves above pavement. Ryan stared in disbelief as the girl did something that made no sense. She was focusing on the boulder. Her fingers twitched, and the boulder shifted, moving, sliding, like it wasn't solid at all. It was as if she had bent the space around them. Before Ryan could ask what was happening, the boulder shifted enough to reveal a hidden cave beneath it. Without a word, the girl pulled him inside, sealing the entrance behind them. They were hidden for now. But the sound of engines still echoed in the distance. The escape was far from over. The truth unveiled. The cave was cold and silent, its walls damp with the scent of earth and moss. Ryan stood in the darkness, trying to steady his breathing, his mind reeling from what had just happened. The girl was sitting against the far wall, her legs drawn to her chest, her eyes distant. She hadn't spoken a word since they entered, and Ryan could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, like something was about to break. He didn't know what to say. He barely understood what had just occurred. The way she had manipulated the boulder, the strange energy she had wielded, it was like nothing he had ever seen before. And the fear in her eyes when the enemy was closing in. She wasn't just afraid for herself. She was terrified for him too. But why? Ryan stepped closer to her, careful not to startle her. He didn't want to seem like a threat. He had no idea what kind of power she had, but he had a feeling it was something far beyond his understanding. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice soft in the darkness. "We're safe for now, okay? But I need to know who they are. Who's chasing us?" The girl didn't answer immediately. Her fingers twitched slightly, as if she were trying to regain control over something inside her. Then finally, she lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. For the first time, Ryan saw something else in them, a deep sadness, like she had seen too much, lost too much. "They're not just soldiers," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're hunters. They don't just kill. They capture. They harvest." Ryan frowned, confused. "Harvest?" She nodded, her eyes drifting to the shadows. "They take what they need from us, our abilities, our memories, our lives. They turn everything we are into something they can use, something they can control. I escaped them once, but they will never stop hunting me. Ryan's heart sank. What are they, exactly? Are they from your planet? The girl's lips trembled, her gaze flickering toward the darkness, as if the very mention of it caused her pain. She closed her eyes, her breath shaky. They're not from my planet, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But they came to my world long ago, brought a disease, a plague that spread across the land, infected my people. The ones who didn't die. We were changed. She paused, her eyes locking onto Ryan's. I was one of them, a survivor, but not just any survivor. I was different. I had power they needed. Ryan's mind spun. A disease, an alien plague. And then she said something that stopped him cold. Power, he asked. What kind of power? The girl looked at him, her eyes flickering with something Ryan couldn't place. I can manipulate energy, control matter, bend space. She glanced down at her hands, which were still trembling slightly. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. But it's what makes me valuable to them. Ryan's mind raced. He remembered the way the boulder had moved, how she had bent it with her bare hands. He could hardly wrap his mind around it. Control matter. It sounded impossible. That's why they're after you? Ryan asked, the pieces slowly starting to fall into place. She nodded, her eyes dark. Yes, they've already taken so many of us. They want to create an army, a weapon that can't be stopped. And I'm one of the last who can stop them. But I'm not the only one. There are others. Survivors. People like me. Ryan stepped back, his mind reeling. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Aliens hunting people with powers, harvesting them like crops. He had thought he was dealing with simple soldiers, maybe mercenaries or invaders. But this was different. The girl continued, her voice quieter now. The people who sent the soldiers, they're not from this galaxy. They'd been moving through the stars for centuries, searching for the most powerful beings in every world they visit. They call themselves the Reapers, and they believe my kind is the key to their dominance. Ryan's stomach churned. Reapers, it sounded like a nightmare. And now he was caught in the middle of it. He didn't know whether to feel pity for the girl or fear. But one thing was clear. Whatever she was, whatever they weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something much bigger. I'm sorry, Ryan muttered, though the words felt hollow. I had no idea. But what can we do? How do we stop them? The girl's gaze softened, just for a moment, before her expression hardened once more. We can't stop them alone, she said, her voice steady now. But together, we might stand a chance. I've seen what they can do. I've seen the destruction they leave behind. And I won't let that happen here. Not again. Ryan's mind was racing, but one thing was clear. He was in this now. Whatever this girl was, wherever she came from, they were in this together. And whatever power she had, he had to help her find a way to use it, not just to survive, but to fight back. He nodded, a sense of resolve growing inside him. Then we'll fight them. We'll find the others. And we'll take them down. The girl looked at him, her expression unreadable for a long moment. Then, finally, she spoke. First, we need to get to safety. They're not the only ones hunting me. She stood up, her movements fluid and graceful, almost like she had been born to move in the shadows. We're not safe here. Not yet. Ryan followed her gaze to the cave entrance. He knew she was right. The hunt had only just begun, and they were far from out of danger. But one thing was certain now. They weren't running anymore. The turning point. The air inside the cave felt thicker now, charged with an unseen tension. The girl had stopped moving for a moment, staring at the narrow entrance as though waiting for something or someone to appear. Ryan could feel the weight of her silence, the way the world seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't just the Reapers they were running from. There was something else, something worse. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, breaking the silence, though the question felt inadequate. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something far more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. The girl's eyes flicked to him, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she moved to the cave's farthest corner and knelt down, as if searching for something hidden. The dim light of the cave barely illuminated her face, but Ryan could see the determination etched into her features. Whatever this was, it was far from over. "They're coming," she said suddenly, her voice sharp. "But not just the Reapers. There's someone else, someone I thought I'd never have to face again." Ryan felt a chill run through him. Who's coming?" She turned to him then, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that felt like a warning. "My people, or what's left of them. They're not like me, not anymore. They've been changed by the Reapers. Their loyalty is to them, not to me. They'll do anything to stop me from leading the resistance." Ryan stepped forward, his heart racing. "Your people? But I thought—" "You thought the Reapers were the only threat," she interrupted, her voice dark and filled with regret. "They are, in a way. But my people, the ones who didn't die, they've become something else. A weapon. And they'll hunt me down without hesitation." "They're called the Sentinels," the girl replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're the Reapers' ultimate enforcers. They hunt down anything that threatens the Reapers' control, and they're unstoppable." Ryan's mind raced. He had faced the Reapers and survived. But this creature, this Sentinel, was different. It was pure force, an embodiment of terror designed to crush anything in its path. A low growl rumbled from the Sentinel as it stepped closer, its massive form blotting out the stars above. Ryan felt a cold sweat break out along his back as he instinctively reached for his rifle, but the girl's hand shot out, stopping him. "No," she said urgently, her grip firm. "You can't fight it. Not like this. It's too powerful." Ryan glanced at her, confused and desperate. "What do you mean? We can't just run from it." She met his gaze, her eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "Running won't help. But if we're going to survive, we have to ally with the one group that can take it down. They are the only ones who stand a chance against the Sentinels." Ryan blinked, trying to process her words. "Ally? Who are we supposed to team up with? The Reapers?" "No," the girl replied quickly, shaking her head. "There's another faction, one that the Reapers fear. They've been fighting them for centuries. They are the last hope of my people." Ryan's confusion deepened, but before he could ask more, the girl turned, her gaze locking onto something in the distance. "They're here." Ryan squinted into the shadows, his instincts screaming that he wasn't ready for whatever was coming next. But as the shape emerged from the darkness, he felt a strange chill run through him. Not from fear, but from recognition. It was a group of figures, cloaked in dark, tattered uniforms, their faces hidden beneath hoods and masks. They moved silently, as if they had stepped out of thin air. The girl stepped forward, her posture tense but not hostile. The figures approached, and one of them, the tallest, raised a hand, signaling for the others to stop. Ryan's heart raced. He didn't know whether to draw his weapon or wait for the girl to explain. But the leader of the group spoke first. "You've come for help." The voice was deep and gravelly, full of authority. Ryan couldn't see the figure's face, but the tone left no room for doubt. This was someone powerful. "And you found it." The girl nodded. "We need your help to stop the Sentinel." The figure studied her for a moment, then turned to Ryan, who still stood, unsure of his role in this strange alliance. "You're not from her world," the figure said, voice laced with curiosity. "Yet you fight for her. Tell me, soldier, what are you willing to sacrifice?" Ryan felt a shiver of uncertainty. "Anything. I'm not leaving without a chance to stop that thing." The leader gave a slow nod, then turned to the others. "Prepare the weapon." Ryan had no idea what they meant, but he instinctively followed their lead, the girl beside him. As they moved, the figures led them to a hidden encampment on the outskirts of the field. It was a concealed base, nestled in the ruins of a broken city, camouflaged from sight. It was here, among the wreckage, that Ryan finally understood the gravity of their situation. The leader explained quickly, his tone urgent. "We are the last remnants of the true resistance against the Reapers. We've been fighting them since they arrived in this sector, but we don't have the firepower to take down a sentinel, not without help." Ryan's mind spun. The Reapers had allies, enemies, and entire factions in play that he hadn't even begun to understand. And now he was stuck in the middle of it, with only this ragtag group and the girl to trust. "We've been waiting for you," the leader continued, motioning to the girl. "We knew that someone would come, someone with the power to turn the tide of the war." Ryan turned to the girl, his confusion deepening. "Wait, what do you mean? You're telling me you've been waiting for her?" The leader's eyes softened, though his voice remained steady. "She is the key. She is the last of her kind. The last who can unlock the power we need to defeat the Reapers and their sentinels. But she cannot do it alone." Ryan's mind raced, the pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a battle for the future of two worlds. And somehow, he had become part of a fight that stretched far beyond anything he could have imagined. The girl stepped forward, her expression solemn. "If we fail, it won't just be my people who suffer. Earth will fall too. The Reapers want to take it all. And I can't let that happen." Ryan knew then, in the pit of his stomach, that this was the moment everything changed. There was no turning back now. He didn't know what the future held, or whether they would survive the coming battle. But one thing was clear. Their only hope lay in this uneasy alliance, with the girl, the resistance, and whatever mysterious power she held. They were going to fight. Together. The final showdown. The night sky overhead seemed to tremble with energy as the battle loomed on the horizon. The air was thick with anticipation. Every heartbeat a countdown to the clash that would decide the fate of two worlds. Ryan stood beside the girl, his pulse racing as they looked toward the distant lights of the enemy forces gathering. The Reapers, their sentinels, and now their unlikely allies, all were preparing for the final confrontation. Ryan couldn't help but feel the weight of what was at stake. Just hours ago, he had been a soldier, unaware of the intergalactic war unfolding beneath his feet. Now he was part of something much larger, fighting not only for Earth's survival, but for the freedom of an entire alien race. But as the battle drew nearer, the girl's words echoed in his mind. "We're the last hope," she had said. And now, more than ever, Ryan understood the depth of that truth. The camp was alive with movement as the resistance prepared their weapons. Strange devices, alien technology fused with Earth's military tech, hummed with power. Ryan adjusted his own rifle, but this time, it wasn't just about pulling a trigger. It was about strategy, about using everything they had to push back against the Reapers. Beside him, the girl stood quietly, her eyes locked on the horizon. The power that had once terrified him now felt like the only hope they had. He wasn't sure what it was, this strange energy that seemed to flow from her every movement, but he had come to understand that it was their greatest weapon. And the resistance knew it too. "We need to move," the girl said, her voice steady. But the tension was clear in her eyes. "Once we reach the front lines, it's up to us to hold them back long enough for the others to attack." Ryan nodded. He had no illusions about the odds. The Reapers weren't just any enemy. They had wiped out entire civilizations before, and the Sentinels were practically indestructible. But there was something about the girl, her resolve, her strength, that made him believe they might stand a chance. As they approached the front lines, Ryan could see the enemy formations in the distance, their dark silhouettes marching forward with precision. The Sentinels stood at their center, towering giants, casting long shadows over the battlefield. Ryan felt a knot form in his stomach. They were going to need more than weapons to win this. The girl stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her gaze was piercing, filled with determination. "I can feel them," she said, her voice low. "They're trying to get inside our heads. The Reapers know what I can do. They'll try to break me before the fight even begins." Ryan felt a shiver crawl up his spine. The Reapers weren't just an army. They were manipulators, able to control minds, twist emotions, bend willpower to their will. He knew that if the girl faltered, if she let them in, everything they had worked for would be lost. "We won't let them break you," Ryan said, his voice firm. "You've already done the impossible. We can do this together." The girl's eyes softened for a moment, but only for a moment. She nodded, stepping forward into the heart of the resistance. Ryan followed, his mind focused. There was no room for doubt now. There was no turning back. The battle erupted just as the first light of dawn began to break through the dark clouds above. The Reapers launched their assault, waves of soldiers charging forward, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. The Sentinels followed, their massive forms casting shadows that seemed to swallow everything in their path. Ryan fired his rifle, the sound of gunfire filling the air as the first line of enemy soldiers fell. But it wasn't enough. For every one that went down, two more took their place. He gritted his teeth and kept firing, but deep down, he knew this wasn't going to be won with bullets alone. Then the girl stepped forward, her hands raised to the sky, and Ryan felt the air shift, felt a powerful surge of energy ripple through the ground beneath them. The enemy paused, as if sensing the same power, and for a split second, everything stood still. The girl's voice cut through the air, barely audible over the sounds of battle. "This ends now." Ryan watched in awe as the girl's energy began to twist and form into something massive. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air shimmered with a strange electric light. It was as though the very fabric of reality was bending to her will. Then, with a single motion, she unleashed her power. A pulse of pure energy shot from her hands, rippling through the battlefield with blinding force. The Reapers' soldiers faltered, their weapons faltering in the face of the overwhelming power. But it wasn't just the soldiers who fell. The Sentinels, those towering giants that had once seemed invincible, staggered under the weight of the girl's energy. Ryan didn't hesitate. He knew this was their chance. As the Sentinels stumbled, their mechanical bodies shuddering with the impact of the blast, he signaled the resistance forces to advance. The battle raged on, but now it was different. The girl's power had turned the tide. The Reapers were disoriented, their once impenetrable forces crumbling in the face of something they couldn't control. But even as the girl fought to keep her energy focused, Ryan could see the strain in her eyes. The effort was taking its toll. He could feel it in the air, the way the very ground beneath them seemed to hum with her power. She was pushing herself to the limit. "We need to finish this," Ryan said, his voice sharp with urgency. He could see the final wave of the enemy forces pushing forward, the last of the Sentinels standing tall and ready to strike. The girl nodded, her breath shallow. "Together," she said, her voice determined. She took a step forward, her hands glowing with the remnants of her power. Ryan raised his rifle one last time, focusing on the final wave. This was it, the last stand. With the girl's energy empowering him, and the full force of the resistance behind him, Ryan took a deep breath and fired. The sky lit up in a flash of brilliant light as the battle reached its crescendo. In that moment, it was clear. Victory was within reach, but it would come at a price. The fate of both worlds hung in the balance, and the cost of peace was yet to be determined. As the last of the enemy forces fell, Ryan and the girl stood together, staring out over the battlefield. It wasn't over yet. The war was won, but the true battle, the fight for their future, was just beginning.